It's time for Tab Talks, your weekly conversation about matters of faith. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash.
And I'm your co-host, Debbie Campbell.
We are talking about yoga and yoga in public schools today, the possibility of that anyway in Alabama. And to talk with us about that topic, we have Alabama attorney Eric Johnston of the Southeast Law Institute and Reverend Clete Hux of the Apologetics Resource Center, also in Alabama, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. All right. So to make sure we all understand, there is currently a ban on the practice of yoga in public schools, and that dates back to 1993, I believe.
It does.
So the question at hand right now, however, is that there is a bill before the Senate, because it's already passed the House, that would overturn that ban in a sense with some stipulations. And so the question is that an okay thing to do? Can yoga be taught in public schools? What does all of that mean? Why is there even a question? And so Eric and Clete, we will just kind of dive in and figure all of that out. And just one other note, the House bill is House Bill 235, sponsored by Representative Jeremy Gray out of Opelika, Alabama. And so as far as what I've been reading, Representative Gray actually teaches yoga and has said he's had such great success in his history, how it's been a stress reliever, helps him with anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. So he's looking at it, I believe, from a health kind of standpoint and wants to provide that to the schools and to the students. So with that background, Eric, jump in and just give us the law background on this and then get us started, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, yep, glad to, Jennifer. Thank you for having us today. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
In 1993, the state school board got passed a regulation of the Alabama Administrative Code, which is a bunch of regulations for schools, that yoga, guided imagery, all the meditation, all these things could not be taught. And they were defined in the code as being religion. And that stayed there that way until 2018, when there was a fellow, Rajad Zed, who's head of the Universal Society of Hinduism, wrote or contacted the school board and said, you need to let children practice yoga. And it was very religious in his presentation to them. At that point, the Southeast Law Institute wrote a letter to the school board and said, you can't do that. The reason we have the regulation, it would be an establishment of religion, that yoga is religion. And as Clete will explain to us, I'm sure in more detail, that is the basis of this whole problem. Yoga is religion. Well, they took it off the agenda at that time, but then they brought it back up. And so we wrote them another letter when they were going to amend the Alabama Administrative Code and said, this is an establishment of religion, you cannot do it. So they took it off the agenda again. That was in 2019, in February. And then just a few weeks after that, Representative Gray filed the bill to legalize the teaching of yoga in public schools, grades K through 12. It got out of the committee in 2019. 2020, it was refiled, but because of the truncated session and the COVID, they didn't really do a lot of bills. So it'll be a brand new bill if it comes back, and I suspect Representative Gray will bring it back again, exactly the same bill. Very short, very sweet. You can teach yoga, period. You can't do any kind of use of technical terms or the spiritual aspects of it, just the physical. But it leaves it at that. It doesn't have any more regulations, any more restrictions, no parental consent, nothing that you might expect to have in something like this. So that's a short history on how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, and that makes sense because I misspoke. It would have been in front of the Senate if the session had played out, but because of 2020,
but they'll have to start over brand new in the new session if they do it again, which, like I say, I suspect they will.
Right. And to your point, the bill actually does say that it would all instruction in yoga shall be limited exclusively to poses, exercises, and stretching techniques. All poses shall be limited to sitting, standing, reclining, twisting, and balancing, and all poses, exercises, and stretching techniques shall have exclusively English descriptive names. I thought that was interesting. And then chanting, mantras, various greetings will be prohibited. So Clete, jump in there on that. What do you think those prohibitions are in there for, those extra definitions and explaining it at that level?
Well, the prohibition is rightfully in place because there is no yoga without the religion of Hinduism. There is no Hinduism without the practice of yoga. And any practice of a religion, in this case yoga, will ultimately promote the religion, in this case, Hinduism. And so that's the way the court ruled, or the bill in place stated for the last 27 years. But what has happened, of course, is with the New Age movement having become very popular in this country, that provided a foundation. And the New Age movement basically is the Eastern mystical religions, beliefs, and practices. Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen Buddhism especially, and Taoism come to the West and wedded to our pragmatic mindset. And so what has happened is that now in the New Age, they're trying to redefine yoga away from its spiritual and religious roots, which you cannot do that. There are yogis all over this country going crazy, saying that they are stealing from our religion and profiting from it. And that is the MO of the usurper. The question is, can you redefine someone's religion? And that's exactly what is taking place with this bill. And Representative Gray, matter of fact, by his own words, admitted that. He said said to the Montgomery Advertiser, in order to get things accomplished on the floor of the House, he had to strip it down to its just physical postures. But the postures themselves, the asanas, taken from Hindu Sanskrit, are representative of nature worship and Hindu gods and goddesses. So when you start saying, well, we can do yoga without Hinduism, or you say, well, can we do Christian yoga? Well, that's like baptizing paganism, basically. You're trying to redefine someone's religion. And of course, that runs against the grain with any Hindu that's in our country.
Well, let me, either one of you want to address this. It has become very popular, especially, you know, in the gyms, the workout places, you know, a lot of sports complexes offer these classes now, which then opens the door maybe for parents to think more open-mindedly about it. So what are your thoughts on that, since it has become very acceptable in many of our public facilities for workout?
Let me jump in here, Clete, and define where we are with this issue. In the gyms and by voluntary participation by adults is one thing. Putting it in the public schools is another thing. And we're talking about kindergarten to the 12th grade. That is where it's going to be taught without parental consent, without parental participation. So parents won't even know maybe it's being done initially. The issue is training children in this yoga. And I suspect that most children in elementary school would know more about how to use the internet and get information than we would. And they would be able to access additional information, even though they had a very strict regimen at school of physical activity. They could go home and Google yoga and they would find all about yoga. I Googled yoga in preparation for one of the hearings to see what kind of yoga businesses there were around the state and in the area. And there were a lot of them, and every one of them had on their website the mental, spiritual, emotional aspects of it. It's not just physical. The children would then be led to a deeper understanding of what it is. You know, the cases in law, the reason we have the Establishment Clause that does not permit religion in schools is because teachers are respected. Teachers are very important, and we expect children to obey them and believe what they say. So when a teacher says it's all right to do this, then the child's probably going to accept it without questioning it. And so we don't want to open that door with spiritual warfare that may go on with young children and even older children, teenagers, are susceptible to this kind of thing. So that is the specific battleground that we're involved in right here. The wider culture and what's going on just makes it that much easier.
Well, Eric, something you
Yes.
said there, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, but something you said there, there seems like there's lots of layers of concern or debate going on. But one thing, if it were defined as a religion and it could not be separated as what seems to be what is being attempted, would that play out with what Christians deal with a lot of Christians still speak to the Bibles in school, prayer in school, those kind of things that were removed? Would that open any kind of door that would then have all religions finding a way to say, well, if you've allowed a religion in, then that changes everything?
No, I don't think so. Back in the 80s, we had the very famous school prayer case in Mobile, and it got through the Supreme Court. And, it just said we could not have prayer in Alabama schools. Well, the judge in that case said the history of the Establishment Clause is that it has singled out Christianity as the one religion that is not permitted to exist in the public square. And that's exactly where we are today. Anything Christian can be maligned, but you talk about, Hinduism, Muslims, Jews, they don't get marginalized like we do in the law and in the public square. So just because one kind of thing is taught, it is not going to open the door for the others to go in. I think we will continue to see, particularly if there's a change of administrations in this next election and change in the Congress, more restrictions on religious freedom than we've ever seen. So Christianity is always the target for the secularists in our society.
Yes, exactly. Talking about having it in schools to as young as K-5 all the way through 12th grade. Kids come in with a special teacher, a yoga teacher, out in California, in the Escondido area of California. Sometime back, there was Ashtanga yoga, that's known as 8-limb yoga, by Pathabi Joyce is the founder of that. And the school boards out there in that particular district allowed this because the foundation paid $4 million to the school district in order for this to be taught. And so, but the thing about, you hear arguments, well, it relaxes the kids. Well, they could take a nap and get relaxation, There are plenty of alternatives as far as exercise programs that can be shared without doing yoga. But let me explain a little bit more about this as far as some of the things that Representative Gray tried to strip the bill of meditation. When you and I think about meditation years ago, you and I thought of using our alertful, watchful, cognitive, conscious mind, meditating on scripture as a Christian would do. But when you hear the term meditation today, it doesn't mean that anymore because we bought into the East coming West. And it's Eastern meditation. Here in the West, you and I live on the basis of separating of object from subject relationship, okay? Good and bad, right, wrong, God and creation. But when you look at yoga and the worldview that it encompasses, it is not separation, but conjunction or union. It's based on a monistic, all is one is all worldview. And it is paganistic in that it promotes pantheism, pan meaning all, theism meaning God. And the early Hindu Sanskrit scriptures, which yoga is based on, yoga is seen as a path to salvation for the Hindu. What Christ is to Christianity, yoga is to the Hindu. What Christ is for salvation, yoga is salvation for the Hindu. And now where was I? Had an interesting thought. We had
Let me put you a pause right there.
a senior moment
Come
there.
come back to it.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's right. That's right.
yeah. But the idea of meditation, the worldview that is encompassed here is to do away with separations. And it really does promote an altered state of consciousness through these dissociative techniques. Yoga is kind of a pathway to go inside oneself and to discover mysticism and that type of thing. There's all kinds of things that it would promote if it would be allowed.
You are listening and watching Tab Talks. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash, here with co-host Debbie Campbell, and we are talking through whether or not yoga should be allowed as a practice in the public school system in Alabama. We're talking with attorney Eric Johnston and Reverend Clete Hux, and they're explaining why they are advocating against yoga being provided and allowed in the Alabama public school system. Why? What do you think about just if the exercises themselves are helpful? Could a PE teacher or just a teacher in this classroom do the types of exercises and just not call it yoga? Would that make a difference?
That reminds me of Dick Sutphin, a New Ager, about 30 years ago. He says, you know, we can change the names and demonstrate the power. And in so doing, we have something that is very acceptable to the general public. That's called disguising things. You really can't separate. It's fine to do exercises, but why call it yoga, you see? Because again, it gets back to that worldview that I was talking about. There is no separation of the physical from the spiritual in the worldview that yoga is going to promote and bring with it. There was a movement established by Hindu students in America back in 1993. They called it World Vision. They were preparing for 2000, the millennium, and World Vision 2000. And their stated goal was to invade the universities and campuses of America with the Vedanta worldview. And Vedanta is based on that monistic, distinctionless worldview. If you want to get right down to it, again, I mentioned paganism. The Apostle Paul has something to say about that in Romans 1. He said they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served the creation rather than the creator. When you think of Hinduism, people have talked about 300 million gods, or 300 million gods in Hinduism. That's because what they have done is that they have divinized creation and done away with any one particular creator per se. And you and I can achieve our divinization or divine self through the path of yoga that really allows us to see that we are the universal or God self soul of the universe.
Well, Eric, why do you think there is a need for a bill then? What is the purpose of a bill to overturn the ban that exists rather than just teachers doing what they need to do?
The administrative code section is still in effect. And so right now, that is the law, that regulation. Mm-hmm. It says you can't teach yoga, and it defines yoga as religion and goes into a lot of detail. It's about 2 pages of fine print long. It's very detailed and identifies the religious aspects of it. What Gray is asking for is a statute, which would be a law passed by the legislature, which would govern all schools. The school board would have to go by what it said. It would overrule a regulation. A regulation is passed by the school board. It's a kind of a lesser law. But right now that regulation is there. The school board, rightfully so, they tried twice in 2018 and in early 19 to change that, but they backed off. They realized they were getting into an area where they shouldn't be. And so they relied on Gray then to pass a statute, which would then let the school board do whatever, they wanted to, and they would keep pass regulations on, how it would actually be done in the schools. But that statute just gives them the authority, and that's why Gray was doing the statute.
So you're saying that if a school wanted to, they could opt out, or if a school would have to offer yoga?
Right now, a grade 7 through 12 could have a yoga club. Under the federal equal access law, you can have Bible clubs. And so if yoga is religion, which it is, they can have a yoga club, and they can call it not religion if they want to, but it would still be permitted. And that's grade 7 through 12. They could do that right now in public school, but it would not be something that can be participated in by teachers. That law forbids teachers or adults to be involved in the student clubs. So you could have at the high school, a yoga club that the students would run, and that would be permissible. But really what they're after is just across the board, all grades from K to 12, having teacher-led yoga classes.
But the schools could opt out, correct?
Well, how do you mean opt out?
Well, if this statute was to pass and the ban were to be overturned, would the K through 6 be required, or would they?
No, they couldn't do it if the law was overturned.
Right.
Yeah, the 7 through 12 could still do it as a religious club, or they could call it a non-religious club that's still permitted. The point is, with equal access, you can even have a Christian club in the public schools. That's permitted, and that's been upheld by the Supreme Court. It's just that the lower grades would not be able to have it. And right now, the way the statute's written, there's no parental consent or approval or even knowledge students are being taught. And it's just, we've been discussing, it's so pervasive in our society right now. Most parents probably don't realize the adverse impact it could have on the spiritual life of a child.
So if a parent is concerned and they would like to know more, do you suggest they talk to the teacher, their student's teacher, or the principal, or the school board, or where would you send concerned parents?
Well, right now it's not an issue because it can't be taught. The administrative code forbids that from happening, and so it's.
But what if it is being taught and they don't know it?
If what, pardon?
What if it is being taught and it's just not known?
Well, and I understand it has been taught. It's being taught in some schools, and the teachers, the parents need to go to the teachers and say, "Do you realize you're violating the Alabama Administrative Code? It's not permitted to be taught." And they would have to stop it at that point. And it may be that the teacher would have to get, a lawyer or somebody to write a letter and say, "Here's the code section. Look at it. You can't do it." Or maybe to the principal of the school. It's got to be done voluntarily. And I would say probably just out of ignorance, teachers may do it. They maybe do it in a PE class and not even realize that you can't do it. Joe Morton was the superintendent back in the 90s when this was done, and Joe understood these kinds of issues. And he wrote a memo to all the school teachers and boards and whatnot and said, "You can't do this. Here's this code section. Be aware of it." To my knowledge, there's not been any kind of a reminder like that done since he did that.
Well, and that's a good point, because sometimes, we all have policy handbooks and all these rules, and you hear them the first day you go to work, but then you do kind of forget some of that. So without those reminders.
They never knew it, maybe. They just never realized it. We got new teachers coming in the system every year, and they probably never even thought about it.
You're so right. Well, anywhere you would send people to just to learn more about the concerns of yoga as a religion?
Call the Apologetics Resource Center.
Okay. And is there a website?
Yes, arcapologetics.org.
arcapologetics.org.
Yes.
And then, of course, your Congress person, I guess your state house, your representative or your senator, I can't speak today, your representative or senator in Alabama would be another person you could call to just talk about this kind of bill coming up in the next session.
If it comes back, they sure need to know about it, because the senators and representatives, like most people, would think, "Oh, yoga's yoga, and it's everywhere. It's okay." And they need to be reminded by, informed citizens, this is not something that we want to do. And we'll be glad to answer any legal questions people have. And we have a website, southeastlawinstitute.org. And you can go there and you can probably find some articles on yoga and other things and contact information.
All right, so that's southeastlawinstitute.org. Eric, Clete, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week.